I've been working as a night security guard at Westfield Mall now for about 6 months. Usually, it's a pretty uneventful job, just me, my flashlight, and miles of empty corridors. But last night, well, something happened that I can't explain. I remember it was about 2 a.m. Footsteps definitely coming from downstairs around the east wing. Now, I was assuming maybe it was just an echoing effect of myself, but these were lighter, quicker steps. I messaged my partner, Jake. He was doing his rounds at the parking garage and hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and followed the sound. The beam sliced through the darkness, cutting across storefronts and kiosks that were all shut down. As I passed the fountain in the center court, the footsteps abruptly ceased. I stopped, my ears alert. Nothing but the soft hum of the air conditioning. Then, my peripheral picked something up. I spun around with a racing heart. It was a mannequin in the window of a clothing store. I let out a shaky laugh, chiding myself on being so jumpy. But as I turned away, would you believe it, that mannequin's head seemed to be facing another direction than before. I blinked hard and looked again. No, it was in the same position it had always been. Just my imagination playing tricks. Continuing my patrol, every shadow now seemed to move. The hair on the back of my neck was standing on end as I walked down store after store of lifeless figures frozen in place, their blank eyes following me. Suddenly, the footsteps started again, this time from right behind me. I spun around, fumbling with my flashlight. The beam landed on another mannequin, this one standing in the middle of the walkway. I froze, positive that hadn't been there before. My radio crackled, making me jump. Everything okay in there? Jake's voice came through. You've been awful quiet. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. The mannequin was closer now, arm outstretched toward me. I blinked, and in that split second, its fingers brushed against my sleeve. I ran. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life, not stopping until I burst out of the mall's main entrance. Jake found me there, white as a sheet and babbling about moving mannequins. We went through the mall together, step by step, and there was nothing out of order. All mannequins were back inside their displays, fully still. Jake thinks I fell asleep and had a great nightmare. Probably, he is right. But I called in my notice this morning. I don't care if that makes me look crazy, I'm never setting foot in that mall at night again. Some things are better left in the dark. For nearly 2 decades, the shopping center had sat abandoned, like a ghostly chunk of what it once was, looming on the outskirts of town. I'd been planning to explore it for months now, intrigued by rumors of its eerie history and the strange occurrences people reported experiencing, but I wanted to do it right. I'd stream the whole thing live, bringing my viewers along for the ride. Not that I was going in alone, mind you, had my friend Jack, who practically hankered at the prospect of going out into the forsaken mall, all the same, more skeptical. We slipped in after midnight, being careful to keep our lights low as we slipped through a broken side door. The air was thick with mildew and decay, filling our lungs with a damp, musty scent that set the tone instantly. Shards of glass from shattered display windows crunched beneath our feet, echoing down empty hallways like soft footsteps. We waded through the food court on camera, capturing every cracked chair and rotting countertop until Jack elbowed me and pointed. There, from one of the old clothing stores, Willow's Fashion, the faint flicker of light seemed to be illuminating the otherwise dark space. I squinted and zoomed the camera in on it. It was no light, at least, not exactly. Rather, it looked more like an old dimmed sign flickering to life, as if trying one last time. You see this? I whispered to the stream chat, hardly able to believe my eyes. Someone must have rigged it up as a prank or something. Jack muttered something about squatters, but his voice was a little shaky. We went inside carefully, and closer, I realized there was movement. In the dimness, behind the glass-topped counters, there were people, a little cluster of 4 or 5 standing in the middle of the store. They were wearing old-fashioned clothing, old style, like they just stepped out of a department store catalog from the early 90s. Hello? Jack called out, but it was like his voice just dissolved into the stale air, swallowed by the hollow space of the mall. One of them turned to face us, a middle-aged man with a slight slouch. His eyes were wide but oddly glassy, and as he looked at us, his face split into a smile that seemed not quite natural. The others all just followed his gaze and continued on to stare at us, unblinking with these strange frozen expressions. My heart was racing as, in a hushed tone, I told Jack, "They got off." Then I realized something else. They didn't move. Not a one of them, not even a little bit. It was as if they were mannequins animated by some tricks of light and color, fixated in place and staring. Then, one of the women in the group, a woman in her 20s with a permed style of hairdo with a faded pink blouse, took one jerky step forward. "Do you need help?" I asked, and my voice came out hoarse. She cocked her head, and in a voice barely sounding human, she whispered, "It's been so long." The words screeched out of her like they'd been dragged up from the bottom of her throat, unwilling, strained. Beside me, Jack shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting for the door, just as disturbed as I was. I tried acting calm for the stream, but my heart was racing. Then, as if on cue, all of them took a step forward, their movements disjointed and sluggish, as if tugging against some unseen weight. The light flickered again, putting their faces in a pale, ghostly glow. They hadn't aged a day since the mall closed 2 decades ago. There was no mistaking it. The woman in the pink blouse looked exactly like a newspaper photo I'd seen of a young employee who'd gone missing right before the mall shut down. My breath caught as Jack whispered, "We need to go. Now." I didn't argue. We slowly backpedaled, all the while not wanting to be shown our backs to them. They just stood there, that same vacant stare, as we neared out of view. It wasn't until we turned to leave that I saw them one last time behind me, and a chill ran through my veins. They were standing beside the door to Willow's Fashion, the 3 figures side by side, their heads cocked just a little. The pale shop sign above them cast an unhealthy yellow shade on their faces, and I swear, even from a distance away, I could see their mouths moving. They were mouthing something silently, over and over. I didn't stop to make sense of it. Then we ran out of the mall, afraid to turn our heads and look back. Finally, when I was inside my car, still fighting for breath, I closed the stream. We sat in virtual silence while we tried to wrap our minds around what we'd just seen. A few days later, I checked on the comments that had been said on that stream and found my way onto it, hoping for some explanation. Every viewer was equally bewildered by the whole occurrence. And there was one comment, "They're still waiting there. They always will be. That's why no one's come back." Even now, I feel that those beings were something more than simple vagrants. They were something else, entirely doomed to be caught in the afterimage of a life they could never truly abandon. I work in a small cleaning crew that was contracted to prepare an old shopping mall for demolition. It had been abandoned for years, just left to rot after a string of unsuccessful attempts to bring it back to life. On our last night there, we were clearing out the final section near the basement. That's when we found it, a hidden door, covered by old janitorial supplies and broken furniture. It was a door that led down via a flight of narrow, cold concrete steps. The deeper we went, the heavier grew the air, stale dampness against our skin. At last we reached the bottom. Our flashlights shone into a low, cramped room in thick concrete. Old markings, symbols I'd never seen before, scratched into the concrete, forming a circle in the center of the room. Rusted and empty cans lay everywhere in view, as if somebody had been camping here years ago. Yet there was no sign of living quarters or tools. Just those symbols. One of them, Kyle, a coworker of mine, shifted uncomfortably, laughing, saying it looked like the set of some horror movie. But that joke died really quick, as we started hearing something. First it was faint, almost like wind. Then it grew louder, distinct. Whispers coming from somewhere behind the walls. They echoed, layering over each other, an eerie chant that seemed to reverberate through the concrete. Did you hear that?" I asked, barely above a whisper. But everyone nodded, eyes wide. We flung our lights around the room, trying to catch what uttered such a thing, but the whispers kept themselves well hidden. We edged towards the walls, feeling for any draft or gap. Nothing was out of the ordinary, just blocks of cold concrete. Then as suddenly as it began, the chanting stopped. The silence in that room was thick. I was just about to suggest we leave when Kyle suddenly noticed something glinting in one of the dark corners of the room. As he approached, the object turned out to be a small, rusted metal box that was locked but half buried in dust and debris. He fiddled with it, trying to pry it open. However, the lock wouldn't budge, so he jammed it into his backpack and said we'd look at it later. As we made our way upward, back up the stairs, the air grew almost chilled. But before we got to the top, we heard it again. But this time, a whisper yell, as if someone were right behind us, breathing in our ears. Leave. None of us turned around. We ran up the stairs, slamming the hidden door behind us. Outside, none of us spoke a word to each other. We just packed up and left. A bit afterward, Kyle texted me, letting me know he had no plans to open that box. He actually threw it away, and part of me was glad. But that wasn't even the worst part. Later in the night, I could have sworn I saw someone standing at the edge of my driveway, observing me through the shadows. I told myself it was just paranoia, a trick of the dark, but the feeling didn't leave me. Every once in a while, I could have sworn I still hear those whispers, faint but unmistakable. Unable to explain it, I am convinced that whatever lay in that hidden sublevel was not ready to be found. And maybe, just maybe, it's still out there looking for us.
Thanks for joining us in the shadows tonight. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories every week. Have you got a story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And remember, the darkness holds many secrets. Are you brave enough to uncover them? Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Sweet nightmares.